Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
Brought to you by Finance Trust Bank, putting women first, and Mama Laundry Powder. Wash cleaner than clean.
Spectrum wants to hear your views. You can SMS at any time during the show. Type Spectrum, leave a space, type in your contribution and name, then send it to 7197. Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
Good evening, listeners. Welcome to Spectrum on Radio 1. I'm your host, Edmond Chizito. On Spectrum tonight, will the social development sector deal with its wider challenges and mandate based on the resources it has been allocated in the national budget? The Ugandan Parliament concluded the appropriation of the 2015-2016 national budget on Saturday. The final position before the House was that the national budget will now stand at 24 trillion shillings. The House will resume for a reading of the budget on the 11th of this month, preceded by the State of the Nation address, which is on Thursday this week by the President. As we continue analyzing the budget, we focus on the social development sector, whose objectives include increasing household incomes, promoting equality, enhancing the availability and quality of gainful employment, and increasing access to quality social services, among other things. The social development sector entails protection of vulnerable people, for instance, women, children, the elderly, and those in areas prone to conflict and violence. According to the 2015-2016 national budget figures, the social development sector has been allocated a total of 73.3 billion shillings, which is just about 1% of the total 24 trillion shillings budget. Stakeholders are concerned that the sector, which handles issues of men, women, children, youth, the elderly, and people with disability, is still the least funded. Some key priorities of the sector have remained unfunded. The Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development wanted 10 billion shillings towards the Senior Citizens Grant Scheme and 10 billion shillings for the Equal Opportunities Commission, which would set salaries. But, this has been pushed back to the 2016 budget. That's the budget that follows next year. So as we continue analyzing the 2015-2016 national budget, we look at what has been provided for the social development sector and try to see if it's adequate to address the critical issues under this sector, which by far has a wider mandate and cross-cutting challenges. Our guest tonight, Ms. Sophie Kyagulayi, Program Manager in charge of women and leadership at Forward, that's an NGO. Forward is also actually a member of the Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group. You're most welcome, Madam Sophie Kyagulayi.
Thank you, Edmond, and good evening, our dear listeners this evening.
We also expect to be joined by Mr. Chateka Mondo, Assistant Commissioner Youth Affairs in the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. He also is the de facto spokesperson of this ministry. Sophie, has next year's budget provided enough money for social services?
Edmond, I think our listeners this evening would appreciate an answer that is put into context of the whole budget. And allow me to share with them some simple information around this year's budget 2015-2016. And after sharing, they will be able to determine whether some sufficient resources have been put in the social development sector. Our dear listeners, as Edmond has already introduced, on Saturday the 30th of May, as mandated by the Public Finance and Management Act, the new one, Parliament, in a special sitting, passed the 2015-2016 budget. And the budget passed, as per the Appropriation Act, is 24 trillion Uganda shillings. But you'll be interested to know what exactly is this 24 going to go to. Let me give you the topmost key sectors that are taking a big chunk of the 24. The first is the public debt repayment. And I think this is taking the biggest chunk. It is taking 6.4 trillion. If you're a good mathematician and you have a pencil or pen near you, start calculating. So reduce 6.4 trillion from 24. Second to it is the work and transport sector, which is taking 3.2 trillion. Third is the energy sector, which is taking 2.7 trillion. Fourth is the education sector, which is taking 2.0 trillion. Fifth is the security and defense sector, which is taking 1.5 trillion. And then finally we have healthy sector taking 1.4 trillion. That's in the trillion category. So those are the key priorities for Uganda, the big spenders. Happy to note that education and health somehow find their way there. So we clap to that because we've been calling for them to be key priorities. But also you need to know that agriculture, the backbone of many sustainable livelihoods in Uganda, will only be able to take away 486 billion shillings. And that is what is going to transform many of the household economies in Uganda, 486 billion. Also, Ugandans need to know that this time round, the government of Uganda will only be able to finance 44.5% of its budget. And how do you reach at 44.5%? This is reached at after looking at the revenue projections for the period 2015-2016. The revenue projections are at 11 trillion Uganda shillings. And when you do 11 trillion Uganda shillings with a 24 trillion budget, of course you remain with a balance of about 13 trillion. Looking at 13 trillion would mean that 55.5% of the budget is going to be funded externally through public debt, through borrowing, external and domestic borrowing, and private sector. So Uganda is losing grip on funding its own budget.
Oh.
Yes, because now we are going back. And key for Ugandans is to note that the biggest investment this year round, this financial year round, is on repayment of debt. And repayment of debt, of course, there's so many questions around where do we put the debt money, which I don't want to go through. But the whole process of approving debts at parliament level has a lot of loopholes, which maybe Ugandans need to know. But that's not the subject for today. Coming back to the social development sector. The social development sector managed to move away with 73.4 billion.
Less than half a percent.
73.4 billion.
Yes.
Remember the trillions? Not even 100 or
It's
200.
Less than half of
It
a
is
percentage.
exactly 1% of the national budget.
Well, it's less than that. It's
Or
less than
even
half a
less than
percent.
that.
Yes.
So that's the response I can give, Edmond. Thank you.
Well, we've just been joined by our second guest, Mr. Cheteka Mondo, spokesman for the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. You're most welcome, Mr. Cheteka Mondo.
Thank you, Edmund. Good evening, dear listeners.
They give you a very small amount of money. What are people going to do? You can't demonstrate in government.
Well, that's what normally happens with the social sector. The good news is that we are trying to move away from sector budgeting to program budgeting. And there lies hope for this country. Because the social sector is a catalyst for development. Without funding social sector, you find a lot of things lagging behind. You cannot talk about 100% immunization if the social sector is not funded. Because the social sector does, among other things, mobilize the people to be able to embrace program interventions that are developed by government. The sector is an engine that will make socio-economic transformation among our people. The moment the social sector is not funded the way it ought to, of course, we can talk about this and we say it's because of constrained resource envelope. He has already talked that we are coming away from government being able to fund to getting back to donor funding. Well, we can debate on that one. I know that even yesterday, Akoro was saying that they have already surpassed what they were supposed to collect as Uganda Revenue Authority. The debate could be about the priorities of government. But I know that among the priorities of government, and which you can debate again whether it falls under sex or not, is human resource development. A lot of resources are going to go into human resource development. Because the truth of the matter, we cannot develop this country without having the requisite capital, human capital, that takes forward the socio-economic transformation of the country.
So can you talk to us about the impact of this lower funding? What exactly can we expect to see the gaps that we would be seeing at the end of this financial year coming back?
Edmond, I think it's important for us to understand what exactly is in this social development sector. Which are the budget votes in this development sector? Of course, you find the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development taking the biggest chunk. You find Equal Opportunities Commission in there. You find Kampala City Council Authority in there, and local government. But out of the money that has been allocated, the biggest chunk goes to Ministry of Gender, Social and Labour Development. But even within Ministry of Gender, Social and Labour Development, it is mainly the Youth Fund that is within the Ministry of Gender. So, because when you look at the social development sector budget, it has been increasing over time. And with the Youth Fund, it really doubled so highly. So it's still the Youth Fund that is really having so much money in this particular sector. So we've seen from our analysis that, for instance, the Equal Opportunities Commission, despite even getting a budget vote for the last 2 years, non-sufficient resources have gone to the Equal Opportunities Commission. But with the Equal Opportunities Commission, that's where issues concerning gender, equality, opportunities for all, employment are supposed to be demystified and agreed upon and even prioritized and operationalized. But if the Equal Opportunities Commission is not receiving sufficient resources, it has a lot of gaps in it, from personnel, taking call to, it cannot move. So we don't seem to feel the presence of the Equal Opportunities Commission, despite the so much energy we had in advocating for its coming on board. So the fact is that it's not sufficiently resourced. So if it's not sufficiently resourced, you could not see some of the equal opportunity issues arising from this particular perspective.
What the entire sector got.
When you go to Ministry of Gender,
Yes.
there are a lot of issues within Ministry of Gender that are financial based. There's so many things that the Ministry of Gender is not intervening in because of its little resources.
Like what?
For instance, there's so many gender guidance that is expected from the Ministry of Gender. Today, we are talking about the Certificate of Gender Equality. This Certificate of Gender Equality is a new development that has been placed with whose mandate has been placed with the Equal Opportunities Commission. But ordinarily, the Certificate of Gender Equity would have been a premise within the Ministry of Gender itself. But because we know that the Ministry of Gender has a lot of challenges internally, we can't move the Certificate of Gender Equity to Ministry of Gender to manage it. Good enough, it moves to Equal Opportunities Commission. But even Equal Opportunities Commission is equally unfunded. So Ministry of Gender has failed to guide mainly on gender within different sectors. Because now with the Certificate of Gender Equality, the Ministry of Gender is mandated to ensure that each sector must specifically spell out the gender needs and the gender requirements that it's going to finance or program or prioritize within a given financial year. So if Ministry of Gender is not resourced, both financially, human resource and technically, it cannot provide this guidance to the other sectors. So you find that even for gender equality alone, we still have challenges.
Right. Mr. Mondo, what are you people going to do? You got, the entire sector got less money than they gave Basaja Valaba not too long ago. How are you going to break it up in the end? 73 billion shillings.
Of course, it's a challenge, and has been a challenge that we have lived with for some time. Not that we are comfortable with it. We are not comfortable.
With what? Giving money to Basaja Valaba?
No. I don't want going to that. Edmond, don't drag me into that.
Please go.
I will not discuss that one. We are not comfortable with the fact that the resources are not adequate for us. And as she has mentioned, the biggest chunk of money we are going to receive is going to go to Youth Livelihood Program. But also I want to mention that there is a new program which is coming in called Green Jobs Initiative. Some money is going to be allocated to this new intervention. The intervention is about basically having development, but also considering the issue of sustainable development, how sustainable and undertakings we are having. Of course, like he said, we are loaded with a lot of things. Among other things that money will go to is the industrial court to handle labor disputes and ensure that there is harmony at the workplace, and all those who are aggrieved should if Edmond is not being paid the way he should be paid at Radio 1, you should go to industrial court and complain and see how you battle it with Maria Chwanuka, and then whoever wins remains with the job. So there are all those interventions. It's also true that EOC has not attracted enough funds. But outside the funding from government, we are trying to, like she pointed out, to see which other development partners can come in to support. But also we are in position to present a case about inadequate resources in areas that are very critical. Like she has pointed out, we are in the business of ensuring gender mainstreaming at all levels, in the different ministries, in the different sectors, to ensure that issues to do with gender are mainstreamed. But again, it's also true that we have a lot on our plates. Gender-based violence continues in your homes, and many times we are not able to reach out in your homes to ensure that we smoke out domestic violence. It's no longer an issue for women, by the way. Sometimes people think that gender-based violence is about women. There are some of you men, I'm not saying you, Edmond, who are also tortured by the ladies. Some of them have even been killed. Women have killed some men as a result of gender-based violence. But we're also looking at, we have a new policy that we have just completed, the Early Childhood Development Policy. We are saying that you cannot talk about meaningful human capital development without investing in early childhood development. So we have come up with a policy which is integrated and comprehensive early childhood development policy to ensure that it helps everybody who is trying to be relevant to the cause of the children to know how to intervene. As it is right now, you know very well that early childhood development, if you are looking at it from the education point of view, is only the private sector that has been putting in money. We are now trying to see how this can be taken on by government to ensure.
You want to build nursery schools, kindergartens, daycare centers.
We are proposing that every school should not start from P1, but should start with a kindergarten.
At what age?
At the age of 4. Three, four. It's part of socialization of the child. It's not too much learning, but also the other centers, early childhood development centers, are the ones that will help us enable women, because we have 25% of the children that are produced in this country are by teenagers.
Yes.
And oftentimes they don't know what it means to be a mother.
Go on.
They don't know what it means to be parenting. So we want centers that should provide counseling and guidance on what ought to be done. There are few of these girls who know that a child is supposed to be exclusively breastfed for the first 6 months, and that the recommended age of weaning off the child can be 2 years, or should be 2 years, or must be 2 years. So there's a lot of interventions that we want to put together under the package of early childhood development to ensure that we have a population that we can be proud of.
Are you getting a lot of money from other sectors? You say it's no longer sector budgeting, it's program-based. Are you getting a lot of money from other programs, like immunization and so on?
The new method of programming, we are now coming to program budgeting rather than sector programming. We have found out that when you budget according to sectors, you move in silos. And it's like Ministry of Education is not connected with Ministry of Gender. Yet there are so many things that we can do together. For instance, if I talk about early childhood development as a program, Ministry of Gender has a lot to do, Ministry of Education has a lot to do, Ministry of Health has a lot to do. And so when you budget according to programs, then you can be able to say, okay, we are going to work together as sectors that are addressing the same cause.
And who signs the check? Who takes leadership?
In the social sector, it's the Minister of Gender that must take the leadership.
Well, listeners, this is Spectrum on Radio 1 tonight. Will the social development sector deal with its wider challenges and mandate based on the resources it has been allocated in the national budget? Our guest, Ms. Sophie Kyagulayi from Forward, which is also a member of a civil society budget advocacy group, and Mr. Charteka Moda from the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. Sophie, did the civil society proposals get considered in this budget we're looking at?
Edmond, this budget is a unique budget because of the unique budget period. As we speak today, the budget has been passed. And with effect from 1st July, we are going to implement a budget that has been passed. Previously, we've had a budget reading in June, and then we have the budget passed by about August. And then the implementation starts. But while that has been the period, ordinarily the budget is being implemented by the fact that it is being read and it's being implemented. But this time round, we are implementing a budget that has already been passed. In terms of civil society proposals, I think I can only say that there have been a number of changes. And with these changes, not all sectors have been able to respond to the budgeting processes as they used to, because it's of course a transition period, and we give them the benefit of doubt. But one interesting thing that I want to talk about is the certificate of gender equity.
Yes.
While it is one of the new developments, we actually saw developments or a move to ensure that sectors comply with the requirement of the certificate of gender equity, which I think is a plus on the government side, and we really, really applaud that as civil society. We've made a number of proposals indicating where they should either allocate resources or not allocate resources. But most of our engagement period with the sector policy statements used to come in after the budget has been passed. So now we are engaging with the sector papers before. And of course, not many sectors are able to produce the sector papers before, so we couldn't do sufficient engagement with them. But we did some engagement, and some recognition has also been made.
So they actually listen to you these days?
Because they look at civil society as an actor, as a stakeholder in this particular cause. And we are taking the discussion of budgeting to the people and bringing in the people's voice. So not really listening to us, but we are adding some value to the whole conversation.
And anymore, it's not just these days.
Even
Government
before
believes in the principle of private-public partnership. We take CSOs as partners in this entire intervention of, augmenting government services and ensuring that they provide the checks and balances here and there. So the government listens. And you have heard them making an impact.
And with only health and education.
So you advise them to pay debt, to spend 6.4 trillion on debt, and they nodded their heads.
No.
25%. What does that happen in the world?
On debt, this is what we are saying. On debt, we are saying Parliament pay more attention on what are those projects we are receiving debts for, and where are these projects being implemented, and who is approving these debts. But I have one thing I wanted to talk about.
Which one is that?
The potential for the Ministry of Gender to collect non-tax revenue.
Where would they get the money?
Oh.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to talk about.
Let's take a break. We'll pick it from there. This is Spectrum on Radio, and we'll be back.
Okay.
Oh, the talk you'll have.
Hello, Daddy. Good night, Daddy.
The good night call. Talk as long as you want, for as little as 19 shillings per minute from midnight to 5 a.m. every night with Night Zone from MTN. Dial *135# now to register.
Welcome to the new world.
MTN. Everywhere you go. They call it brunch. Some come for the Spanish omelets and steaky bacon. Others choose it for the mouth-watering pastries and Belgian pancakes, or the steak, or just the sheer joy of spending a lazy Sunday afternoon enjoying great company and delicious food. Whatever your reason, come to Sheraton Sunday Brunch at 7 Seas Restaurant from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. and bring the kids too. They can enjoy lots of free activities, including a soak in the pool, 65,000 shillings for adults, 35,000 shillings for children below 12, and free for kids under 4 years of age. Well worth it. See you at the Sheraton Kampala Hotel.
Refreshments on Spectrum, served by the Kampala Sheraton Hotel. Celebrate your romance with an intimate buffet at Sheraton Kampala Hotel.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
Welcome back on Spectrum tonight. Will the social development sector deal with its wider challenges and mandate basing on the resources it has been allocated in the national budget? Our guests, Ms. Sophie Kyagulayi, Program Manager in charge of Women and Leadership at Forward, that's an NGO. These people are also members of the Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group, CSBAG. We also are joined by Mr. Chateka Mondo, Assistant Commissioner Youth Affairs in the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. He also is the official spokesperson in that place. You will be able to call in a short while and contribute to this matter with us. Sophie, you had a strong argument just before we went for the break.
That the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development has some potential to raise revenue. And this is the non-tax revenue. The non-tax revenue projections for the year 15-16 are at 371 billion. And when you look at the budget approved, the approved budget leaves them at 306 billion shillings. But these figures do not represent the potential that the Ministry of Gender has, with the mandate already that has been given to the Ministry of Gender. And this potential is mainly in collecting the non-tax revenue for government under a number of regulations. Specifically, the Occupational Safety and Healthy Act of 2006 mandates the Ministry of Gender. And if well implemented, it provides that the Ministry of Gender, from licensing and inspection of workplaces, certification of plant and machinery, and approval of architectural designs for fees provided under the regulations, will be able to generate some resource. But we note that due to both limited human resource and technical capacity, this law has not been fully implemented. This time round, we see a government agency that is emphasizing the collection of fees and revenues, non-tax revenues.
Which one is it?
That is the Kampala Capital City Authority.
Yes.
And I must say that the Ministry of Gender can borrow a leaf from what KCCA is doing. They are able to collect these non-tax revenues. So if Ministry of Gender would borrow a leaf from KCCA, it would be able to meet some of these potentials on collecting the non-tax revenue from inspecting workplaces, certification of plant and machinery, approval of architectural designs in particular, because approval
architectural design.
Yes.
For what? For private houses or for industrial?
For industrial, where the component of persons with disability comes in.
Maybe industrial. You know, for residential houses, we seem to have one architect. All houses in Kampala look
the same.
Mr. Chateka Mondo, does this budget address the issue of unemployment, and how do you manage it? It falls within your docket almost.
It does, but let me first comment on what Sophie has said. Sophie, you know very well that towards the end of last year, we issued statements within the papers warning all places of work, including Radio 1, if you don't have our certificate, you will be closed.
Certificate of what?
You know, for every workplace, you must have a license.
Yes.
Because you are having people in those places, so many of them, and if your place does not meet the occupational safety and health standards as stipulated in the Act she has mentioned of 2006, then you are not supposed to operate. You know what happened in the mattress company in Tinda. You go to a place and you find they don't have fire extinguishers, they don't have rules of escape, they don't have this and the other. And these are what our occupational safety and health officials, by the way, Sophie, we have the capacity. We have very professional public servants employed in the occupational safety and health department to do nothing but inspect the workplaces.
And to do that countrywide?
To do that countrywide.
Right. And they have started. That's good.
They have started, and we are trying to put on more people, more men and women on the job to be able to inspect the workplaces.
Is it the employer, is it the property owner?
If this place of yours has not been inspected, better talk to your boss.
Is it the employer or is it the property owner?
The employer. The person who is employing people in that place.
Has to make certifications.
Exactly. And that also goes to some other non-tax revenue we can get in the industrial court as a result of fines, fees, etc. And we are trying to enforce that. You remember the industrial court has been in limbo for some time. It's now working. There are 2 judges already in that court.
What is
There's
it?
human resource. It's in Intinda, what we call the council house. We have a council house in Intinda where there's the National Youth Council, there is the National Council for Children, and there's Industrial Court in the same building. So
fully
they are operational,
facilitated?
Fully facilitated. Oh, you can never be fully facilitated. They are facilitated to the extent that they are able to come to office.
If the ceiling
and work.
is strong enough so it won't fall on one of the judge
No.
as it sits, like it happened the other. Okay, let's talk about the vulnerable people. How will they be affected by this underfunding? The elderly, we know about SAGE, which has not been funded properly. PWDs, the children, the youth have got it. They are voters.
Yeah,
How about the others who are not?
you had initially asked me about the employment, and as Sophie pointed out, that a lot of money is being put into the youth livelihood program. But also, I want to remind Ugandans that even the money for Youth Venture Capital Fund is still revolving within the different banks, especially with Centenary Bank, because Centenary Bank knows how to handle the category of people that I'm talking about. The other banks are more sophisticated and can deal with the Edmonds who are borrowing sizable amounts of money. So for my youth, Stanbic Bank and DFC was not doing very well. But as far as Centenary Bank was concerned, they knew the product that they were handling. And therefore, this money continued to revolve. And youth out there who think that we only have the Youth Livelihood Program, they should be reminded that even the Youth Venture Capital Fund has never been recouped or removed from these banks. And it's a revolving So
fund.
the
The money is still available?
The money is still available.
Not been borrowed in full.
It has not, no.
And it's handled by Centenary Bank?
And it's revolving.
It's mostly micro loans. The
Micro.
other banks prefer big borrowers.
Big borrowers like you.
Yourself.
Like
I've
you
never
and
borrowed
Sophie,
money from a bank.
and not people like me who is a public servant who
I've
gets
never
very
borrowed money from a
little
bank.
money.
Sophie.
And therefore, to that far, unemployment is being catered for. But also, on the other hand, government is going to put a lot of money in skilling Uganda. You know, we have been complaining about theoretical undertakings, and now government said, okay, there's this program called Skilling Uganda. Can we put more technical skills into our young people so that they are able to get jobs or start their own jobs? So to that far, something has been done. Of course, it can never be adequate, but at least something is out there.
Sophie, how well aligned is this budget to the National Development Plan?
Of course, you know that the social sector, the social development sector, responds to the National Development Plan objectives entirely, but particularly focuses on increasing household incomes, promoting equality, enhancing the availability and quality of gainful employment, and increasing access to quality social services. But with this amount of money allocated, some of these things will not be reality. Because when you talk about quality of social services, we have some issues there. It also applies to the social protection of vulnerable people. For example, women, children, elderly, as he has already pointed out. And that's how he also brings in the youth. But for elderly in particular, I want to point out a programming around SAGE. SAGE is, Mr. Mondo will detail, but it's the Safe
Social Assistance Grant
Empowerment for the elderly. It's contributed to mainly by our development
Most
friends.
money comes from the donors.
All of it, not most. All of it comes from the donors.
Give them office space.
And yes, and we've so far implemented it for 5 years, and it has managed to reach out to over 11,000 senior citizens of this country in 15 districts, each getting a tune of 25,000 shillings a month.
Yes.
Yeah. But that program, beautiful as it was, or not beautiful. As it is. Today stands at a standstill because there's a particular requirement from the requirement for the government of Uganda to
counterpart funding.
Yes, to roll it out to all the districts of Uganda, because you can't say that the elderly are only in the senior citizens are only in 15 districts, and they cannot be the only ones benefiting. It was a pilot for 15 districts, so now what is required is to roll it out to the other districts.
They wanted about 25 billion for that.
They need about 31.7 billion.
And the government says
to cover, and this
it
money has not been allocated
for the old men and women,
for the senior citizens of this country. So if it's not been allocated, the question is what is going to happen? But the other concern we also have is that some of this money that is contributed to by these development friends of ours is not reflected in the budget. So it's not easy for monitors to track it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Aid, well, but they keep saying
it's
we'll
more
borrow
of
some.
budget support. So from a civil society perspective, I would want to know if I would share the the recurrent and development. I would need to know. So I need to be more specific on what exactly was in it.
When you talk about quality of social services, what can we expect?
I think you shouldn't expect much. Don't expect anything different from what you have already, because no money has been
Flooding of
put
the city
there.
because we don't dredge our channels, or what? What kind of social service can we expect to skip?
To skip?
Yeah.
Everything that you've been skipping before.
Like what?
If
no Wi-Fi in my compound from the government.
That's government hasn't been giving you Wi-Fi anyway, so you can do without that. But if you look at the health budget, if we were talking about the health budget today, while there's been recognition that it's in the trillion category, trillion club now, would need to know how much of those trillions are going to go to the recurrent expenditure or the development expenditure. And don't be surprised if it is actually recurrent expenditure and development is low.
Well,
so
if development takes slightly more,
so if you have patients in Mulago and you expected this budget to maybe have some miracles around financing either the healthy component and public health at that, availability of drugs and etc., just find friends who can maybe help you to go to Nairobi or
don't worry too much
Uganda.
about health. We know what to do. We fly them to Nairobi, or
and they get the better treatment.
That's what we do with health. If our people can't get services in Mulago, we have another national referral hospital across the border. Mr. Chateka Monda, will this budget help improve household incomes?
That's our big dream, because the aim and the aspiration of Vision 2040 is transform this country from the peasant country that we have been to a middle income country. And therefore, like she said, everything within the budget is anchored within the Vision 2040, but also in NDP 1 and now 2. We are finalizing, or we have almost finalized NDP 2, and spells out the areas that should be focused on. And these are known. One of them, like I said, is the human resource development. That if we have capital, people who are skilled and employable, then you are sure that these people can get jobs. And when they get jobs, they can escape the poverty trap. So that's the whole human capital development. Talk about UPE, talk about USE, talk about early childhood development, talk about skilling Uganda. All those are components that we are considering to be very critical in terms of turning this economy around. The other area that government is emphasizing, which affects the other sectors, is the issue of infrastructural development, and ensuring that people can transport their goods on roads that are easy to access. Of course, there are challenges in some of the villages where you still find roads that are impassable, but the government is putting a lot of emphasis on infrastructural development as a facilitator for the entire development of the country. There's also the issue of agriculture. Still, we are crying as social sector, but also the people in agriculture are also saying, according to the Bamako Protocol, we are supposed to put 10% of the GDP into the agriculture sector. Yes. And the argument from people from finance have been saying that, we are putting even more than that. By building the roads, we are facilitating transportation of goods and services.
Some people actually dry their cassava on those roads. I've seen it with my own eyes.
You have seen the cassava being transported.
It helps agriculture grow.
Then you can talk about tourism. Tourism still remains one of the sectors that is taking this economy forward. And again, it's being prioritized. Of course, not to mention the minerals, oil and gas, and we are thinking that if these boom, then we can have the economy being turned around.
But
as I said, the social sector investment is very critical
in
terms of it being a catalyst and a driver for the entire economy developing. You not talk about development and stopping diseases if people don't have toilets, and they expect somebody from the Ministry of Gender to come and tell them that, it is important that you have a toilet. People are still hazy when we tell them about going to immunize children. Some of them say, these people want to kill our children. And you find such ignorance. So also investing in functional adult literacy to make people, have an understanding of what must be done and what is being done elsewhere, and learning how to count their money is important. And it's investment which is well grounded in terms of real transformation of our people. So to that end, there are fillers that point to the reduction of unemployment, reduction of poverty. As you know, around 1996, poverty levels stood at 56%.
Yes.
In 2010, that poverty levels had reduced to 24.5%.
That's very true.
Last year, we are talking about 19.7%.
That's true.
So there is reduction. But there is still also a problem. In terms of numbers, you still find that these numbers are so high.
Population has been
They are
growing
high
up.
because population has been growing up. And one of the things we do very well in this country is production of human beings. We produce 1.8 million children
Every
year.
Annually.
24.5%.
Twins and non-twins.
24.5% of those are born by teenagers. And therefore, that brings in a challenge in terms of perpetuating poverty. Because if somebody has not managed even to go up to P7,
And they're
the
producing
poverty
babies.
status report of 2014 points out that enrollment has reached almost 100%. But completion at P7 is only 54%. So you
Does
find
it get
it's
to
a dilemma.
54%? It's much less
54.
than
It's less than
It's
that.
much less. It's about less than 20%.
Yeah.
That's what I know from the poverty status report that I've read,
Look
and
at
which I
those
take as
figures.
authentic as a government
Clearly
worker.
gives very
So
different.
there is a challenge.
Before you talk, let's hear from the listeners. Vocational institutes, have they been given enough money? Because there was that argument we will have more universities than we actually,
In Skilling Uganda, maybe.
Well, Skilling Uganda
under
is a stopgap
Skilling
measure. How about
Uganda-
vocational institutes? You're
under
supposed to
s-
fund about 41 or something.
Under
new
Skilling
ones.
Uganda, we have started with 18. And I don't know how many have been built and completed, but I've seen a few in the papers. I've not been able to monitor, but I know it was decided that we start with 18. I know somewhere Namtamba, there is one institution that has just been completed. It's very flashy. And if we put the adequate machines to do the real scaling of these people, I think it will go a long way. One of the most innovative programs that the government has come up with is that Scaling Uganda. It's loaded with a lot of good interventions. If we only
Implement it.
and make our promises matter,
Yeah.
I think that's one of the programs that will take us far.
Let's hear from the listeners. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. Our numbers 0312260390, 0312261390, 0312262390, 0312260490. When you call in, please tell us your name, also where you are calling from. So Skilling Uganda is mostly a stopgap measure. How about vocational institutes like they used to be during the Milton Obote days?
Well, Skilling Uganda also builds on the vocational training institutions, only that in terms of content, it's richer, because it, among others, does not stop at just giving you the technical competence. It also gives you what we call soft skills. Soft skills include things like how to present yourself, for instance, how to speak, how to be honest, how to have financial literacy, how to, the entire
How to argue for a better
realm,
salary.
things like that. It's total empowerment of a human being. So it goes beyond just giving you the technical competence. It includes things like financial literacy, but also entrepreneurial skills. We are arguing that now we have reached a time where all the interventions, for us, we don't care whether you are going to do what you studied, journalism. We are saying that a dosage of entrepreneurship skills is important for you. It is necessary. We don't mind whether you are going to do pharmacy, and we don't mind whether you are doing plumbing or you are doing carpentry. A dosage of entrepreneurship is very, very important. So that makes Skilling Uganda a richer program than just talking about vocational training.
So you might decide to make pancakes in the night, so you can sell them to the neighborhood. Basically, small-scale industry. Some countries have developed in that manner.
Yeah,
Sophie,
cottage industry.
Sophie, what more needs to be done to make this budget more engaging, so it's much more sensitive to the needs of the actual person? Bottom up.
Bottom up. Let me speak to the energy sector and speak to it from a gender perspective. The electricity cover for Uganda has actually increased. There are districts that never had electricity that now have electricity.
They see it flying overhead, the cables. Go on.
The intention was to ensure that electricity, as a target, electricity was to move to the biggest part of Uganda, so that citizens can be able to connect and then be able
their
to
phones.
Yes, no, not charge their phones, but it's I think around the value addition planning for Uganda, because there's a lot of agriculture going on and we need energy to value add on agriculture products. But from a gender perspective, there are questions we are asking. One, of course, is around connectivity. While we've managed to cover the biggest part of Uganda with electricity, the questions of who is actually connecting come in. And this
Who is connected?
Who is connected? Who is connecting?
Right.
And you find that many Ugandans...
Let's take this caller. Spectrum, hello.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening, your name?
This is Kaiwa Haruna from Gomba.
Yes.
I feel very happy when the presenters there mention too much and something about early childhood development. I would like, however, to give me some of the details within the program.
All right, the details will be outlined by the expert here with authority. Yes, Sophie, go on.
So the questions of who has connected, many of...
Spectrum, hello?
Hello?
Yes, your name?
James Kayonda is my name.
Yes, Mr. Kayonda.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Actually, this is so interesting, especially when professionals like those ones in the studios come up with such kind of presentations, especially regarding empowerment of the youth in terms of skills, which can enable them to create jobs other than being job seekers. However, the challenge is several times in Uganda, we are so good at making very good programs, we leave them on paper. And at the end, when it comes to implementation, you find that there is nothing other than just talking. I don't know whether those experts in the field are not just talking, but let me hope that have proper plans, proper strategic plans, proper log frames, so that we can know when are they planning to implement these programs. And then another issue is, we know very well that vocational institutions are actually the backbone if you were to turn the economy and the impact technical skills into people, especially the youth. I don't know whether in their programs there is any kind of plan to liaise with the vocational institutions which are already in place but dilapidated and need improving, and also equipping them with new machines which are probably technology-based. I don't know whether there is that kind of program. And then I don't know whether they can also ensure that they get some exports from China, Malaysia, such that they can be in position to import or bring in technology that fits the economic environment in which we live. That would be so good. I wish they can do it, but if it is in their program, let them enlighten the nation about it.
All right, let's get the responses. Sophie, you're concluding a point, and then you can respond to this.
So there are concerns around connectivity. The power has moved, yes, but because of the poverty levels in this country, the cost of connection is...
Let's take one more, and then we'll get the answers. Spectrum, hello?
Yes, good morning. Good evening.
Good evening, sir. Your name?
Ivan here.
Yes.
Yeah, my comment is in relation to the industrial port which the gentleman has just been talking about. As a practicing lawyer, the legislation which establishes that port has made it quite impossible to access that port. Because you can't go to it directly, and yet the labor officers who are meant to give the initial remedies to the disputing parties don't have the legal mandate to give all the remedies that parties may want. So what do we do? Thanks.
All right, we will get the answers. Yes, Sophie, quickly, and then we'll move forward.
I've basically concluded on
All
that.
right. Yes, Mr. Chatekamondo, you can respond now.
Okay, the first one was the issue of what's the package under the integrated early childhood development policy. One of the components is the component of early education. There's issues to do with nutrition and health. There are issues to do with the entire package about breastfeeding, when to breastfeed, how to breastfeed, for how long to breastfeed. There are issues to do with antenatal care. We are looking at all these things because we are defining early childhood development intervention as being from age 0 to 8 years. So even when the child is still within the womb, there is need for adequate care and protection. There are people, especially fathers, who expect bouncing babies. But then if the wife does not go for antenatal care, and you have not looked after the pregnant lady, and you are going to expect a bouncing baby, Edmond, you'll be lying to yourself.
During the pregnancy, you must be busy buying good food.
You must be busy ensuring that she's getting a balanced diet and she's taking everything that she needs. So the package is comprehensive to the extent that it covers education, it covers health, it covers nutrition, it covers antenatal care. Leaving programs on paper, that we come up with very beautiful programs and they are left on paper. How I wish you had cited some of those that have been left on paper. But in this program, we talked about skilling, and I said skilling is on and running. We talked about youth livelihood program. Youth livelihood program is on and running. Youth venture capital fund. By the time I was coming for this program, I was cross-checking with Centenary Bank, and they told me so far, they have accessed young people with over 41 billion.
They've given out 41 billion.
41 billion to different young people, different programs, and young people have been paying back, and that's how it can use cumulatively reach the 41 billion. So it's up and running. USE, people have complained about USE and UPE, that's not quality, but at least somewhere we have started. There are at least some young people who would have missed off on education, at least they are attending school. Right. It may not be quality education, and that's what government is now trying to address, the issue of quality of the education we are talking about.
The industrial code.
We are building on existing interventions of vocational training to ensure that Skilling Uganda program does succeed. When the caller talks about industrial court, it's impossible to access the court, I didn't quite click what he means, because right now the industrial court judges are extremely busy with so many cases that they are attending to, and these have come from people. So when you say the law makes it impossible, then I'm wondering where did these files that they are working on and which are making them extremely busy coming from?
Because it says labor officers don't have legal mandate. Maybe we'll talk about that on another occasion. Thank you very much. Our guest tonight, Miss Sophie Kyagulayi, Program Manager, Women and Leadership at Forward. That's an NGO. They are also members of the Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group, CSBAG. Thank you for coming tonight. Also, Mr. Chatekamondo, Assistant Commissioner Youth Affairs, also spokesman for the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development. Well on top of your game this time. Thank you very much for tuning in. I've been your host.
Thank you, Edwin.
Spectrum, we'll be back tomorrow. Up next is the news in English.
Etihad Airways now flies daily from Kolkata to over 100 destinations across the world via our home, Abu Dhabi, with convenient onward connections to cities across Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. Fly to any of our 6 American destinations and clear customs and immigration before you take off with the US pre-clearance facility at Abu Dhabi International Airport. What's more, you can connect to your Etihad flight from over 53 cities across India with our partner Jet Airways. Visit Etihad.com today or contact your nearest travel agent.
Are you looking for alternative investment options? Do you want to save for your future and that of your children or dependents? Then buy shares in any of the listed companies on Uganda's stock exchange and start growing your wealth. Visit Capital Markets Authority on 8th floor, Jubilee Insurance Center, Parliament Avenue, or visit our website www.cmauganda.co.ug to access the list of licensed brokers. You can also visit the CMA Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn pages for more information. Capital Markets Authority, protecting your investments.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
Brought to you by Finance Trust Bank, putting women first, and Mama Laundry Powder, wash cleaner than clean.
The views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of this radio station or its management.